Time to bring in my next guest for the show. Jeff Gerard is the founder of Simon Soldiers Foundation, a nonprofit employing veterans training homeless canines to be emotional support buddy dogs for military veterans disabled by PTSD. He is also the executive producer for Gerard Films, a TV production company that has produced some of the most successful cause marketing and direct response campaigns in television history for Walmart, Visa, Costco, and many others. Jeff, welcome to the program this morning.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
So, Jeff, let's start off with tell the audience, what is Simon Soldiers?
Simon Soldiers is a foundation that we created to employ veterans training rescue dogs as buddy dogs, battle buddies for veterans who are disabled by PTSD. There's a number of organizations that are doing this. Most of them that do it, they get puppies, little Labradors or whatnot. It takes 2 to 3 years to train the dog, and it usually costs about $40,000. We take a faster track approach. We get rescue dogs from various organizations and train them to be basically battle buddy dogs. They're not necessarily service dogs when they come out, but they do help the veterans with their issues with PTSD, with the traumatic things. Basically, you can train a dog really quickly to a dog can be in tune. The main thing they need to do is be in tune with the emotional status of the veteran. If he's having a problem, they can sense it and they can nudge him. They can get him away from the problem before it ever starts. So what was the motivation behind the creation of Simon Soldiers then? My father was over at Haley's VA hospital, and there was a therapy dog there for many years named Simon, who was a huge black poodle, and he was very helpful to my father psychologically in terms of getting through. My father was there for 18 months with a broken hip and recovering, and I saw how that Simon would help the young veterans that are just back from the war. They would spend time with them, petting them, whatnot, and you could see the soothing, the calm that would come over them in working with Simon. And as I learned more about it, I learned that the dogs were probably one of the most effective therapies for veterans with PTSD. They just off the charts in terms of what they can do for you.
So you're saying the dog can actually help, I wouldn't say cure, but help, bring along a patient suffering from PTSD then?
They help them deal with it. For instance, if they're out in a crowd, they can watch their back. If they're at home and they starting having depression or flashbacks or anxiety, the dog can be trained to sense emotional changes in you, and the dog will nudge you or basically bring it to the veteran's attention and get them out of that. They also serve, by doing this, it also gets veterans with PTSD, a lot of them will withdraw into their own home. They don't want to go out. They don't want to see anybody. By doing this, the dog gets them out. It also gets them back into kind of a society where they're dealing with other veterans that are dealing with the same thing. They see the same problems. The VA currently does not fund this. Congressman Bill Rackus up in Pasco just passed a bill called the Cover Act, which is for alternative treatments for PTSD. And this is hopefully going to get a lot of money towards this type of program for veterans with the dogs. Typically, whenever you see studies that are done with the dogs, you'll see that the veterans' suicide rate goes down tremendously. There's less medications involved. They're back being more productive in society. They can get jobs again. All these things are just wonderful. And
so how does this program, there are other PTSD programs out there that use canines in the treatment. How does this one differ from other programs that are similar?
This one is much faster track. There's about 500,000 veterans right now with PTSD, and right now there's about 2,500 dogs that are trained to cover all that spectrum. We're trying to get more dogs. We're trying to get this in a national program where the dogs are trained quickly. You get a rescue dog that's about 2 to 5 years old, and you can train very quickly. We have some of the best trainers in the country working on this. And we get the dog in their hands where they're at least working with them. They're not going to be a service dog that quickly. It's about a 6-month training program, but the dog is there living with the veteran and can help him through these types of things. Most programs, when they get a puppy, they train them for about 2.5 years. So that's one reason why it takes so long to there's such a shortage of PTSD dogs.
Okay, so you're also the veterans are also the ones training the dogs too, or did I?
We have different ways we can go, but typically, what the first part is to train the veteran to work with the dog, and the dog to work with the veteran. So there's about a 6-month training period where you go through obedience, then you go out in to the airport, to malls and whatnot, so that they can work together. And by the end of about a 3-month period, the veteran could typically take the dog home once he's had obedience training, and they work together, and they pass certain milestones. And over the course of time, they can keep training. If they want to, they can go all the way to a service dog, but that's, again, all these training. Now, the program that we provide, the dogs are free, the training is free. About all the veteran will have to pay for is food for the dog over the course of a lifetime, and we're even working on trying to find a way to take care of that for them.
So how can the community and the listeners help in this program? I mean, what are you needing help from, in what areas in this program?
Well, there's lots of ways they can help. I mean, obviously, donations always help. The more money that comes in is, the more people that we can help. They can volunteer in terms of fostering. They can volunteer just simply if they know a veteran who's disabled or afflicted by PTSD. Send them the website, which is at www.simonsoldiers.org, and let them know about the program. That's really as we start off here, the biggest challenge is getting it to the veterans. We have the dogs available, we have the trainers available. Now we need to get more veterans into the program and spread the word so that they know it's there and what they can get out of it.
Okay, and you're also a filmmaker here. I see you've produced a rockumentary called 45 Wars, a World War II rockumentary. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, 45 Wars is as you say, is a rockumentary. A number of years ago, I heard a stat that half of all college seniors didn't know much about World War II. They didn't know what was going on with it, and I thought, this is ridiculous. This is a key part of our history. And a lot of it is that you watch a lot of documentaries, and they're kind of boring for the younger generation. So we created this using rock and roll music. We interviewed 40 different World War II veterans telling their firsthand stories of what happened, from happy stories to some very horrific stories. And we set it to rock and roll music. We put them in very short segments, anywhere from 30 seconds to 4 minutes, so that the attention span of younger generation that used to MTV, this is really applied to them. So this is ideally, I think anybody will enjoy it, but especially to get the word out to younger people to kind of understand what Grandpa went through.
Yeah, and you were sharing with me, as we talked before the show, that, I mean, some of these stories, it's hard to get out of these veterans. I myself am kind of like an open book. I'll talk about anything, but then again, I've never been through, war. And tell me about, some of these experiences that you had with some of these veterans and getting them to open up about their stories.
Well, generally speaking, when I would go and interview one of the veterans, one of the first questions I would ever ask is, where were you when Pearl Harbor happened? And a friend, I was interviewing one veteran, and he brought a friend of his who was another veteran. I didn't know his story, and I asked him that question, and he said, well, I was walking along at Hickam Field, which was the airfield at Pearl Harbor, and he proceeded for about 10 minutes to tell his story of what happened, and it was riveting. And at the end of it, he broke down, and it turned out his wife was with him, and it turned out that in 60 years he had never told anybody this story. And there was just instance after instance. I had kids that would say, well, you can interview my dad, but he's not going to talk much about it. But I think what happened was these guys were in their 80s and 90s, and I think they realized this was their opportunity to finally tell somebody and have it be a legacy of telling the real story of what happened. And there's some just amazing stories.
I mean, how many different stories are on the rockumentary here? How many different segments?
Well, we interviewed 40 different people, and sometimes there'll be multiple people in one segment. But it's a pretty good cross section, starting from Pearl Harbor to VJ Day and what their experiences were, how they felt about different things. We talked to nurses, we talked to pilots, we talked to people on the ground.
And your father was a pilot too, correct?
My father was a pilot in World War II. He was a bomber pilot in World War II. And again, I didn't know much of his story until I actually sat him down for a couple hours and interviewed him and started finding out things about it. So yes, he was a World War II pilot who passed away last November.
So why is it that they clam up? Is that part of PTSD, or is that just something that was just a different culture back then where you just didn't talk about it because it was just such a traumatic experience? So, I mean, what were some of your takeaways when you talk with these veterans?
I think a lot of these guys didn't talk about it because just at the time, they didn't talk about it. They came home, it was behind them, they didn't talk about it. I mean, if you recall World War II, when somebody really had what was now known as PTSD, back then they called it battle fatigue. And there's a famous story about Patton slapping one of the guys who had battle fatigue. I mean, in this day and age, he probably would have, lost his generalship. But they just did not. That was their duty. They all went through it. They seemed to just have their duty and come back home. And I'm not a hero. I went through it. And I think also they didn't have any way to really express it. I think a lot of it was kept inside. There's a fellow in the story who talks about he had bad dreams for 5 or 6 years and then they went away. Well, he also tells a story that he was in the hospital and woke up screaming at night, and the next morning somebody said, "Who was that screaming?" He kept quiet because he didn't want anybody to know it was him. It was just considered a weakness, I think, really, at that time.
What, in your opinion, what has made society or the veterans more accepting or more knowledgeable of PTSD? Because I think in the 70s, probably nobody understood or had heard of PTSD, and I think 80s and 90s, that term started to come around a little bit more. What was the cause of this transition, do you think?
Well, I think the psychologists and whatnot started learning more about what was really going on. Again, nobody really looked at it. Again, battle fatigue sounds like, oh, the guy's just tired. Think about it, knowing what we know now, the psychological issues, like child abuse and different scars that are left on you. I mean, these guys went through 2 years at least, if not 3 or 4, of some of the most horrific things that could ever happen to a human being.
Yeah. Let me take a quick break, but coming back from the break, I'm going to talk a little bit more with filmmaker Jeff Gerard and also founder of Simon's Soldiers Foundations. Learn more about him at gerardfilms.com. You're currently listening to That Business Show with Jamie Maloney, your business becomes show business. So, Jeff, tell me, what kind of programs does Simon's Soldiers offer for corporate sponsors?
Oh, we got great programs for corporate sponsors. My background really is as a television producer, and for many years I did the Children's Miracle Network show, which is there's 200 children's hospitals around the country, and we used to produce that. We've done shows for Amnesty International, National Federation for the Blind, and typically what will happen is a company like Walmart, Visa, Costco will provide money to produce commercials, PSAs, whatnot for the nonprofit. In Simon's Soldiers, we have what we call a buy one, get one program, BOGO, as you've probably heard.
Yeah, I see it on the TV with the cars out there. That's what immediately comes to mind, buy one, get one car. But go ahead.
Well, and they don't usually do it in TV production either, let me tell you. But basically, we can come out and do a commercial for your. One of the things we found is that 70% of consumers, if you're running something in conjunction with a nonprofit, they're more likely to support your business just because they share your sensibilities. So what we can do is we can come out and do a commercial for your business, and at the same time we can usually piggyback a PSA for Simon's Soldiers or whatever the nonprofit is that touches your strings. If it's cancer, if it's breast cancer, whatever it might be. Generally, what we'll do is we promote your company in being affiliated with Simon's Soldiers or the nonprofit, show what you're doing. It's done very tastefully, and the benefit of that is that the business is doing good business, and that both the business and the nonprofit get
Is this what you mean when you say cause marketing? Explain, to the audience exactly what is cause marketing.
Cause marketing is that basically you're marketing your business by your affiliation and what you're doing for the community, whatever that nonprofit is or whatever you're doing for the community, you're promoting it tastefully. And by promoting it tastefully, it might be just a little logo or, I'm such and such from such and such a company. And then you talk, really, for the most part, it's a PSA about what that nonprofit is or how that program can help the community. The other benefit of this too is when it comes to airtime is you can usually get if not free, you can get very, very good airtime on the TV stations too. So it's really a win for everybody. Your company will be doing good, the nonprofit will get exposure, and in most cases, customers will pay attention and they're going to remember that you were helping someone in the community.
So what is Gerard Films' experience in cause marketing then? Has it been, very plentiful, to the business and to the sponsors as well?
That's really how I started in the business. One of my first things that I did probably 30 years ago was I lived in L.A. for 30 years, which was great for this type of thing. But at Children's Miracle Network, we would get people. I worked with Bob Hope, Steve Allen, all the old greats, and they were just happy to be there and promote whatever they could. I remember one of the first stories I did was about a little girl who had a heart transplant when she was 3 years old. And I thought when I was writing it and producing it, boy, it'd be great to get Betty White, to do the VO on this. And sure enough, it sent it to Betty White, and the next day she was there working with us. So I've been doing this for about 30 years, as I say, for Children's Miracle Network, which is all the children's hospitals. I've done Amnesty International. I've done Natural Federation for the Blind. The beauty of it is it's very rewarding to do it. And we try to find as many ways as we can to stretch whatever your investment is in that production to do as much good as we can with it.
Okay, so explain. I would wrap my mind around the buy one, get one program again for corporate sponsors. So what are you buy a commercial, you get a commercial, or what is this?
Well, you may get several commercials, okay. Actually. We try to find whatever we can to do as much as possible for whatever dollars are being spent. Let's assume a company wanted to put $100,000 towards the nonprofit. We'll find different ways to do it and promote the company at the same time. Typically, when I say a BOGO, that's if you buy one commercial, we're going to throw another one in there gratis. And we look at it as by doing it gratis, we're donating to the nonprofit. And really, if you're going to be in the cause marketing business, you've got to be about doing good, and that's what we try to do. We try to do as much good as we can for as reasonable as we can, and see everybody profit, including the business.
Now, we talked a little bit about your film, The 45 Wars, the World War II rockumentary. What are some of the other films that you're involved in or that you're looking to do in the future? Is it always military-centric? Is that where your passion lies?
That particular one was really, that was a project that probably took 10 years start to finish to get it done. We had to find the veterans and get it all done. That was a passion of love, so to speak. Our company's done all sorts of things. We've done, in fact, years ago we used to do, I don't know if you remember Carlton Sheets. Buy money. Well, you especially would probably remember that.
No money down, or
Yeah, well, that probably drove you crazy too, somewhat. But we did those shows, and they were the most successful direct response shows ever. I've done a lot of direct response. We've done a lot of commercials. Done a lot of straight shows. 30 years in L.A., you get a lot of opportunities to venture into a lot of different ways to do anything. So
where do how do people want to get involved with Simon Soldiers? How do they get involved in this? Are you looking for the pets, the dogs as well, or where are you getting the dogs from?
We're getting dogs. We have a network of rescue organizations right now that are, we go around, they tell us when they see they have a good candidate, and there's, you can tell are you a dog person?
I'm more of a cat person. Yeah,
okay.
But I don't mind dogs, but it just depends.
Well,
I grew up in West Virginia, and everybody let their dogs run free up there, and so I got chased by dogs left and right. So I kind of developed a little phobia of them. That's a whole separate story.
My wife will have to work with you on that one, but my wife's a therapist.
It's different culture up in West Virginia than it is down here with the dogs.
No doubt about that. Rescue dog. You're kind of looking for a dog that you can tell that has an affinity for being around people and can kind of read what somebody's like and their emotions. A number of the rescue organizations will let us know when they have a dog that comes about. We have a veteran right now who is a very big man, very good man, and he needed a dog that was he lives in an apartment. He needed a dog that was about a smaller dog. So we looked around and we found a dog that was an 18-pound German Shepherd mix. Just fantastic dog. The gal who trains it found it, as she put it, going through the hood, just a stray, and she picked it up, took it home, and
so dogs large or small, there really is no certain type of dog that fits this program then.
No, and that's the thing about PTSD is each case is different. So we train the dog and the veteran to work together. Each one is going to have different needs. Some guys are in a wheelchair, some guys are very active. Some live in an apartment, some have a small child. So we really try to tailor. We really look at it and try to tailor it together. If the first match doesn't work, we'll find a second match. As long as the veteran's willing to work with it, we'll find somebody that'll work with it. And the dogs, there is no ideal breed. There's, just ideal dogs. They come in all shapes and sizes, and that's what we look for.
And so for the veterans out there that want to get involved in the program, what's the best way to contact yourself or Simon's Soldiers?
Best way to find it is go on our website, which is at simonssoldiers.org. There's 4 S's in that. There's simonssoldiers.org. Or you can send an email to Gerard at simonssoldiers.org. And please, please, please contact us. We'd love to get you involved with the dog, and you'll see tremendous difference in the way you deal with the world.
All right. Hopefully some listeners will take heed to that calling. Jeff, thank you very much for being in studio today and talking with me about the foundation.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you for the show you do.
Thank you very much. And Jeff Gerard, again, founder of Simon's Soldiers Foundation. Learn more about him, GerardFilms.com or simonssoldiers.org.